Hey there.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay.
perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry for my delay here, everyone.
No,
Wi-Fi
we are
has
so
been
happy
so
to have
slow.
you. I think the world of Instagram Live and technology broadly allows people to connect from so far, but obviously comes troubleshooting with technology and all that. So I'm just going to jump in and introduce you. I think probably everyone has a sense of who you are from having read your book, but I'll introduce you nonetheless. So Minaa B is a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and the founder of Minaa B Consulting, which is a mental health consulting practice that helps organizations find psychological safety. And in her work, she emphasizes the connection between mental health and social justice and teaches individuals how to foster self-efficacy and enhance emotional resilience through community care. And additionally, Minaa serves on the Mental Health Advisory Committee for Wondermind, which is a mental fitness company co-founded by Selena Gomez. And she's the host of the podcast Mindful with Minaa. And of course, we're here today to discuss her wonderful book, which was the September, I forgot what month it was for a second, book club book, which is Owning Our Struggles, A Path to Healing and Find a Community in a Broken World. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
I loved your book because it is so actionable. I loved how at the end of each chapter, you provided exercises which are so practical. And I also really loved several of your phrases, such as stop doing dishes in your bedroom. There was periods of time throughout the book that really made me chuckle and take note of things that I'm doing and loved ones are doing and my own therapy clients are doing. In the book, obviously, you talk about being a community-oriented therapist. And so for those who need a reminder, can you briefly remind people what community care is and what a community-oriented therapist is?
Yeah, so community care pretty much is recognizing the importance of relational healing in order for us to create collective healing. And so it's really all about understanding that as individuals, we need people, we need resources, and we need people in different aspects of life, from whether it be close relationships, acquaintances, very, very close friends, but even those professional networks that we tap into plays a role in our community care and healing. So it's about us as individuals also being a part of healthy neighborhoods, having a healthy social infrastructure. All of that is tied into community care. So when I say I am a community oriented therapist, what I'm basically saying is I work with my clients to help them enhance their relational building skills. And when I'm focusing on them as a whole person, I'm also trying to have a clear understanding of the resources that they can tap into that exist in their community, whether it be having friends, family, a support system, but also who are their paid and professional networks that they can lean on, and also having a clearer understanding of their social infrastructure. So you live in a highly crime populated area, a high crime populated area? Do you live in an area where there are urgent cares, where there are hospitals, where there are doctors, right? Because our social infrastructure is tied to our well-being as individuals. So when I'm working with someone, I'm not just focusing on what is the problem you're bringing to the therapeutic relationship or even coaching clients. I want to have a clearer understanding of the community that you're involved in, because that can also play a role in your healing.
Yeah. And I saw someone writing and saying that's amazing, and I agree. And I think it's so important because I think, like, even the idea of therapy is, there's couples therapy and there's individual therapy and there's
Yeah.
group therapy and there's family therapy, but therapy is really like an individual process by and large. And I think you do such a wonderful job of pointing out that while individual therapy can be really conducive to change, it often isn't sufficient for change, right? Because we live in all different types of ecosystems and communities, and that focusing on the self is rarely enough.
Right. And I think that's the core part about community care is that I always remind people we bring our full selves to community. So you have to remember that if you are somebody who has a trauma history or you have had some sort of relational wounds, then if you're not healing yourself, you're going to bring that stuff to the community that you want to be a part of. So if you have certain ideologies, if you're rooted with self-hate, if you have self-criticism, if you're chronically judging yourself or judging others, you're going to bring that into the communal space that you're trying to exist in. So this is why I also say that, self-care is the bridge to community care, and community care is the bridge to community healing. It starts with us as people because we make up community, right? People are what plays a role in a world functioning. And so when we are working on our own healing, we bring that to the community. And when we have collective healing, we can see our world change.
Yeah. And it's interesting because as I was reading your book, so as a clinical psychologist, I often work with children. And I couldn't help when reading, but thinking about the ways that I firmly believe that the way we talk to future generations, to children, to adolescents about adversity, about oppression, about mental health is really key to enhancing community care, right? It all starts with the future generations. And I think by and large, our society has made a lot of progress toward destigmatizing mental health, but especially in certain communities and, often marginalized communities. Like there's a long way to go. And I think that's true throughout society generally. What do you feel are actionable ways that we can redirect the ways we talk to children to enhance community care more broadly?
I think the first thing is teaching children to be compassionate children. I think that first starts off in the parent-child relationship. And I used to work with mothers who struggled with mom guilt or different things around mistakes that they would make. I would always give them prompts or give them reflections around like, what does it look like for you to show your child the mistakes that you make? And help them become compassionate children and recognize that people do make mistakes. There are times where we mess up. We model that back to our children when we apologize to them, right? There's no such thing as there's no need to apologize to a child. You let a child know that I'm also someone who is seeking compassion and trying to practice self-compassion. I'm also asking for compassion from you, and I'm apologizing for the mistakes that I've made. I'm apologizing for the ways that I've harmed you. I think that also models to that child what an apology is, helps model to them and teaches them empathy, because that's something that's really hard to teach someone. But when you start from young through modeling that behavior, practicing emotional regulation, and providing them with language and modeling for them, helping them to see, right, the different ways that you are holding yourself up with compassion, it actually helps your child as well. I also think that we can start young when it comes to teaching children about mental health. When I would work in classrooms, I would do little meditations with the children. I used to work in early Head Start, so the kids were ages 0 to 5. So sometimes when I realize that there's a lot of emotions happening in this classroom, how about we do a quick meditation practice? How can we practice mindful moments with kids versus feeling like we need to separate ourselves from children to practice mindful moments? Now, there are going to be times where it can be pivotal for you to have your own alone time, your moment for solitude and reflection. But we do know in the world of parenting, that's not always going to be the case, right? There are going to be times where your kid is just always there. And so I do think that it's important to have mindful moments, which basically means moments throughout the day where you are practicing mindfulness, tuning into your nervous system, teaching your child how to tune into their nervous system. And that actually gives them language around mental health. It helps them to understand, give them language around when are they angry, teaching them different emotions, helping them identify their emotions. How are you feeling right now? You look like you are upset. Are you upset? Would you agree that you're upset? Helping them have a clearer understanding of how to be more in tune with themselves and building upon that as they grow. And I think that plays a role in destigmatizing mental health so that children can feel like they have more language around it, but more understanding of what it is. And we realize this is a human thing. We all have mental health. And so what can we be doing to take care of it from a young age?
Yeah, I think there's often a desire to protect children from difficult topics, difficult emotions. And while there's some validity to that, right? Like children don't have to and perhaps shouldn't be exposed to everything. When people try too hard to introduce the language of talking about difficult things, it makes children feel like they can't express it themselves, right? That they learn to mirror how other people do or don't talk about mental health in difficult
Right.
conversations.
Right. And we do want to be able to teach children how to self-regulate, because when we talk about difficult things for a child, maybe falling off a bike is the most difficult thing that they've ever experienced in life, right? And to us, that might be, okay, you're going to get back up. I'll give you a Band-Aid, help you self-soothe. So I think it's really all about helping children regulate when there's difficulty, regulate when there's those tough emotions. But if you, as a parent or even a caregiver, because we're all interacting with children to some degree, and I even write in my book, community care is childcare. So I believe all adults technically should have the skills related to early childhood development so that they can learn to help children and learn to interact with children and engage with children, because sometimes you'll be engaging with children that aren't your own kid, right? And so giving them that language to be able to identify their emotions, because there's no way to eradicate emotion. We're not going to outgrow emotions. We're born with these emotions, they're innate. And so the best tool you can give your child is the ability to regulate the emotions that they're born with.
Yeah, I think that's so true. You know, I think we could spend our entire time talking about community care because there's so much there, but you know, I'm mindful of time, and people wrote in about several different topics that I want to try to scratch the surface of, you know, as many as I can. So someone had written in, or a few people did, and often what I try to do is take similar questions that people wrote in with and try to combine them. You know, someone wrote in saying, you talk about how it is that in our relationships that we gain the tools we need to do the healing work. And this person said, I often find that people seek relationships to distract themselves from pain or grief, which actually delays healing. How can we discern when a relationship has the power to heal in a healthy way versus when a relationship might divert the healing process?
Sorry, Sarah. I think I don't know if it's my internet. Something's a little shaky here, but can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can. It's a little glitchy. So
Okay.
unfortunately, I didn't hear the whole entire question.
So let me try, and if other people are having trouble hearing me, definitely write in so I can see what I can do about my internet. So the person had said that you write in the book that it is in relationships that people often do the healing work. And this person said, I often find that people seek relationships to distract themselves from pain or grief, which can delay the healing. And so how can we discern when a relationship has the power to heal in a healthy way versus when a relationship might be a tool to divert the healing process?
Okay, so it's still a little glitchy, everyone. I'm so sorry. I feel like I was able to grasp some of the question. So what I did hear though was, how do we know if a relationship is more so a distraction from our healing process?
Yeah, so
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, okay. I think that there are times where, I also write about this in the book, that there are going to be times where we need moments of solitude in order to practice self-attunement before engaging in a romantic relationship. And the key word here is romantic, right? Because I think when we hear relationship, sometimes we automatically assume a romantic relationship. But when I talk about relational healing, I'm talking about all kinds of relationships, whether it be you having a relationship with an acquaintance, a relationship with a friend, your relationships with your colleagues. So I want to make sure that we're expanding our definition of the term relationships, because you can be practicing relational healing while being single. And so I do think that it's important to recognize when you may need to practice solitude before jumping into maybe a romantic relationship. And you can understand that by, one, asking yourself, where am I in my healing journey from the last relationship before I jump into a new one? What are some lessons that I learned from that relationship? When I think of my grief, when I think of my pain, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is the worst, where am I on that list, right? Um, I think another thing is sometimes when we are jumping into these relationships, if you find that these relationships are chronically having the same type of ending, that could also be a sign to you that maybe you are the common denominator and you need to try to take a step back to do more self-reflecting to figure out what are the emotional wounds that are driving you, what are you bringing to these relationships, and it's possible that you're bringing maybe past hurt and past pain into these new relationships because you're not really taking the time to sit with them and process them and figure out what went wrong in those last relationships. What can you be doing differently? What are your deal breakers? What are your values? What are you seeking? And so I do find that it's important sometimes for us to realize before jumping into another romantic relationship, how can we utilize the other relationships in our lives as a mirror for us to look inward and say, am I even ready for a partner? Right? And this is where you start to check in with your friends. This is when you start to build and tap into your community so that whatever those desires are that you're yearning from a partner, you can try to somewhat get that from the other forms of relationships that you have before you do the work of trying to enter in a whole romantic relationship. So I think those are some ways that we can figure out by looking inwardly to say, is this the best option for me right now? Or should I take a moment to self-reflect, practice self-attunement, look inward, and do more healing?
Yeah. I think that that's very well said, and an important distinction that relational healing doesn't just have to be in romantic settings. And so many people wrote in about the grief of singleness, saying like, please say thank you for talking about it. So I'm sure you've heard it before, but I think it's a topic that really resonates with a lot of people. And I think there are well accepted scripts to say to people about grieving a death or a loss. But less so about how to address what to say to loved ones who are grieving singleness. And in the book, I know that you talk about things that people often say to those who are single that are harmful. But what are supportive things that we can say to people navigating the grief of singleness that feel supportive and don't make people feel worse?
I think we can say things like, I know this is hard to process. I think we can say things like, I know it probably feels hard to yearn for this thing and not have it. I completely understand, especially if you relate to that person. Let them know that you relate. Let them know that you understand what they're feeling. Let them know that it's okay to honor what they're feeling. I think those are some scripts that we can be really mindful of because I think if your first reaction is to change the emotion, that's most likely probably not the best thing to say to someone because what you're saying in that moment is this is very uncomfortable. And so, since you're in a state of grief and since you're in a state of mourning, I want to fix that because it also makes me uncomfortable. And so, what can I say to you to make you feel very, very happy? I guess Apple agrees with me because thumbs up went up on my end. I do not know how to turn that thing off. Um, so I think it's all about how can you sit in that feeling with that person and let that feeling exist. So if you have a friend who's maybe venting to you and letting them know, and they're letting you know how difficult it has been to maybe date, I think you can validate that, even if it's not an experience you're having, but based off the information they're giving you, you can say, man, that really does sound hard. And I'm sorry that you're having to go through that. What are the things that I can be supporting you, maybe as a friend or family member, whoever you are to that person? Are there things that I can be doing to help you during this time? I think other questions that you can ask is, what can help you make you feel better during this time, right? And even offer actionable things. Do you want me to be the person who goes with you and sit at the bar, right? And maybe help you, right? Like, what are some ways that I can maybe encourage you to get out the house more? Do you want me to join you for a specific event, right? So you could feel a little more comfortable instead of going alone. I think there are different things that we can do to just be in it with the person without feeling like, one, I need to change this feeling, Or two, if I don't relate, there's nothing I can offer you, because sometimes your friend who's venting to you knows you can't relate. If you're married or in a relationship and they're still telling you the stuff, they know you're not there, but they still want someone who can hold that with them and just listen. And sometimes they may not want anything at all, just for you to listen.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage people to just think about, those are the two fundamental things. If your inclination is to quickly take the pain away, then that's a sign that you need to self-regulate and just be in the moment with your friend.
And I think too, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. A lot of my work integrates DBT, which for people who don't know is dialectical behavioral therapy. And a big premise of that is that of dialectics, that two seemingly opposing things can exist at the same time. And I think that often there can be an assumption that if someone says that they're enjoying dating, that means that they're not grieving the singleness. And that I think it's important to acknowledge that they both can exist, that someone can
Yeah.
enjoy meeting people and going on first dates, or enjoy the independence of being single and still be experiencing that grief. And it's important for us not to make assumptions that it has to just be one or the other. I don't know if I lost you there.
Yeah, I got you back.
Oh,
I'm sorry. This Wi-Fi today. But yes, I totally agree. Honoring that two things can be true at once, two opposing truths can be
yes.
true at once. And so it's really important to just honor that we are people with complex emotions, because life in itself is complex.
Yes.
And so we don't ever move through life experiencing just one thing. We're moving through life experiencing a multitude of things. So we're going to have a multitude of emotions and reactions to the realities that we're existing in. And I think that's a big part of it, just honoring and processing. Like you said, that sometimes you can have a single friend who's going on dates and doing all of these things, but still be grieving that they have to even go through that process,
Yeah.
And so what does it look like for you to check in with that friend and ask them, what does it look like for me to provide you with comfort and support? So I do also want to add here, we can go over time because of my delay with this whole
Okay.
internet thing. So no need to end the call right now. I just wanted to
Okay.
let you know.
Thank you.
Of
I appreciate
course.
it. Thank you again for the time. People wrote in about work-life balance and
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you call this a myth, which I think is a really important thing to call out. So, someone wrote in asking, what are clues that we can look for to help know how to distribute our time in a way that brings harmony? I think especially, and if I can add on that, I think people so much thrive off of the feeling of productivity, that how can they know what brings harmony based on what they enjoy rather than what they feel like they should be doing or what other
Yeah.
people expect them to be doing?
The first thing I encourage people to think about is, what are your values? And I think that's very, very important, because when you start to define what your values are, you are able to use discernment to recognize what you should be prioritizing, what needs to be protected, and what are some things that have to get done, right? There is no what and ifs or buts. This thing has to get done because it is a priority to me. So when you start to create your value list, you're able then to use discernment to protect those things and figure out how can you create a sense of harmony in your life to ensure that those things that you value get your time, energy, and attention. I also encourage you to create a value list in a hierarchy and ask yourself, what is the things that's most important to you and what are the things that might be least important to you? And I think this is important too, because the reason why I say work-life balance is a myth is because when I looked up the definition of balance and even saw like the examples of it, it kind of gave me my aha moment where it says balance is to give something equal distribution. And when I thought about it, it really was like, how can you take the scales and level them and ensure they're even? But to me, I feel like there's really no way for us to do that, because in order for us to level out the scales, each component has to be equal. Each thing on each scale has to be equal, right? So what you're trying to say is, when you say work-life balance, is my work life has to be equal to my personal life. And it's just not possible for those two things to be equal and to give equal distribution, equal energy, equal time, equal attention to two opposing things. And so when we practice work-life harmony, or what we also call work-life integration, we're recognizing that work has to get done. If you work a full-time job, even if it's a part-time job, whatever kind of work you do that you know is tied to your livelihood, it has to be factored into your life. The next thing you're thinking about is work is in the center. So now those value systems exist around work, and you're learning to integrate those things into the system of work. And you're learning to integrate it by recognizing, one, what are my values? And I can start putting it around this bubble, right, which is work, because I'll just use the traditional Monday through Friday. I have to be at work. Maybe your hours are 9 to 5. That is not, that's rigid. That has to stay on my calendar. But I have flexibility about how I use my weekends. I have flexibility around how I spend my mornings and also how I spend my evenings. And when I think about what I value, now I start to insert, where do I need to erect boundaries so that I can ensure my time off from work is a reflection of the things I value in life. And another thing we can be doing is, depending on our work schedules or even the type of work that we do, we can still be finding ways to care for ourselves and our well-being even while working. And so this is where you start to implement systems throughout your day to become more effective at work. And so depending on the level of control you have at work, you might say, maybe I'm going to batch certain projects together and practice time management. Maybe I'm going to carve out little breaks throughout the day so that I can practice mindful moments. After a meeting, I'm going to spend 5 minutes to meditate. During my lunch break, if I'm physically going into the office, if I'm in the mood for camaraderie, maybe I'll eat at the office. But if I need solitude, I'll leave the office. If you're working from home and you find yourself leave my house. And so these are some ways that you can start to integrate as well other things that you value into the system of work, so that you don't feel like your work is taking so much from you, but you're also working and producing, but also creating input, which is, how can I care for myself in the midst of working during this time frame?
And I think that those are all so actionable and seem so sensible, and yet I think it's a lot of people overlook how easy those are to do. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of what you said probably feeds into the answer for the next question. But many members of the book club are therapists or healthcare workers. And I think toxic productivity is omnipresent virtually everywhere, but I think often in healthcare professions, it can especially be the case, especially as waiting lists are so long, or resources and access to care are so sparse, and people often put the burden on themselves to feel productive as a way to feel like they're contributing to society. Outside of these very actionable steps that you just offered, how can people who struggle with setting these healthy boundaries set those boundaries while still feeling aligned with the values of their profession?
Well, I think it's important to remember that you deserve boundaries, because sometimes we feel like if we're exercising boundaries, we're not valuing the profession, or we're not aligned with the values of the profession. And that's actually not true, because self-abandonment and self-neglect does not align with the work that you do, right? And so even when you're talking about the healthcare system is supposed to be focused on your mental health and your well-being, and providing you with the tools that you need, right, to enhance your mental health and well-being. So the first thing is, you need to engage in a mindset shift. And I find that to be the common thing people need when it comes to boundaries. It's because the stories we tell ourselves gets in the way of us erecting the boundary in the first place. We all have the tools and we all have the skills, but the things we say about ourselves and the beliefs that we attach to the boundary setting is what's getting in the way of us taking action. So the first thing that you really need to do is engage in a mindset shift. How can you reframe the way you think about boundaries? How can you also reframe the things that you know are important to you that helps you become an effective worker and helps you be an effective person? Because remember what I said, we bring our full selves to community, which means we also bring our full selves to work.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're bringing burnt out, tired, and exhausted you to your job. And that not only impacts your productivity, it impacts team members and how you engage in team building, and it also impacts workflow. And so think about the things that you need, because I always tell people, remember, your boundaries are a gift to other people. When you exercise your boundaries and you stand firm in the things that you need, you're actually providing a courtesy to the others around you by helping us recognize you need this so that you can be better to me. You need to make sure that you're not checking emails after 9 p.m. because this is going to actually make you a more effective worker. And it's actually going to make you more interested in your job. And we're going to see less turnover rates versus creating a company culture where we are saying you have to answer your emails even if it's midnight, right? So if you set that boundary with yourself, you're actually going to feel more satisfied as an employee because you're actually utilizing your free time to be able to pour back into yourself and invest in yourself.
Yeah, and I think that it's people conflate, and you talk about this a bit in the book, but people conflate the time they spend working with productivity when often when people pour too much time in, it's counterproductive, right? And I think in the healthcare profession, it's easy to see someone saying, well, I could take another patient or I could take another client, but if that's at the expense of being able to relax, engage in mindfulness, do notes or the various tasks that healthcare workers have to do, that sometimes it makes it so that we're bringing less to the people we're trying to help, and our value of trying to help people ends up taking a hit at the expense of trying to see more people.
Exactly. And then I also encourage I always tell people to dig deep about the why. Why is taking more on and taking that extra client and taking on that additional project, why is that actually more important to you than your free time?
Yeah.
Why is that more important to you than you practicing self-care? Because I always tell people, especially when it comes to navigating the feeling of burnout, the only way we can tackle this is to take action. You have to make a decision, and that means the ball is going to have to drop. One of these balls that we're juggling has to drop. And so you have to ask yourself and be reflective enough to say, there might be times where I'm juggling the ball because I would rather do this thing and it means more to me than my own mental health. Because the more you keep juggling those balls, you are actually making a choice, and your choice is saying, this is more meaningful to me and more important to me than me choosing my own peace and my own mental health. So also we have to be very mindful, because sometimes I think we want to wish we can do it all and take care of ourselves and juggle everything, but you can't. So just be reflective and asking yourself, why are you doing more when instead you could be doing something to take care of you? And why isn't taking care of you precedent in this moment?
Yep. And I agree, and I see people writing and saying that what you're saying is top notch and that they love what you're writing. And if I can just add one more related question before we wrap up. You talk about accountability in the book, and people often rely on other people to hold them accountable. But in the book, you write, only you can do your own accountability work. So I'm curious, what are the risks on asking or expecting other people to hold us accountable? Like, is that a falsehood? Or is that just a way to hold ourselves accountable while bringing in someone to assist us?
I don't know
I don't know if
if I
I
lost
lost you.
you. So I do, it's a little choppy again. I hear you talking about accountability. I didn't get the question.
Yeah,
Are
so
you back?
the question was, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's in my connection, so I'm sorry if you can do your own accountability work. And I think often people ask or expect others to hold them accountable. And so I'm curious, like what do you think the risks are on asking other people to hold us accountable? Or is, asking people to hold us accountable, remind us of things, ask us for things, really a way to hold ourselves accountable while bringing someone else in for help?
Okay. I'm so sorry that the internet is so bad. So since I hear some of it, I'm just going to talk
Sure.
about the
Yeah,
concept of
that
accountability that I
works.
wrote about in my book, and I hope I'm answering your question because I
Yeah.
still didn't get most of it. So I did talk about accountability in the book, and I talk about how accountability pretty much is self-responsibility. It is taking ownership of your actions and figuring out an action plan to do things differently. And when we practice community care, we have to be honest with ourselves enough to recognize that because we're humans and we're flawed, we're human and we're flawed, there are going to be times where we make mistakes.
Yeah.
We all have biases. We have implicit biases as well as explicit biases. And there are going to be times where, as a result of those implicit biases, we're still learning, we're still growing. But sometimes we do things, we think things, and we treat people a certain way based off the biases that we hold. And so in our communities, there are going to be times where we are called in, where somebody takes us in and has a personal reflection with us or a conversation with us to say this is some harm you caused. Or sometimes you might get called out, which basically means that you are publicly, sometimes you can be called out, or sometimes people might bring something to you more in an open forum to discuss the harm that you engaged in. And accountability is really all about looking inward and first learning to listen, learning to listen to the needs of other people and listen to how they feel, listen to the things that they're expressing.
So, what can I do differently? Right? I see that I hurt you. Maybe it wasn't my intention to hurt you, but I still did hurt you. Right? And I can't change people's emotions. So if that's how you feel as a result of something that I did, I can do the work of maybe being more reflective to figure out how can I move better and be a better friend, a better colleague, or simply just a better person to you. And when we practice self-responsibility, what we show people is that we're emotionally mature and we're practicing psychological safety. So we can say, I may have caused some harm here, but I'm willing to engage in repair. And being willing to engage in repair is how we engage in collective healing. And so I just talk about accountability in the book because we're all going to make mistakes, but what you do with those mistakes matter.
Yeah. I think that is a really great reminder. I think I love the scripts you provide for apologizing and for accountability and like the importance of being in tune with ourselves, but also owning our role within communities and systems. I thank you so much for your generosity of time and for writing this book. I know like so many people in the book club wrote in saying how much they enjoyed it. For people who loved your book and want to consume more of your wisdom, where else can they consume everything you have to offer?
Well, you can go ahead and follow me right now on my Instagram platform where I share more daily tips around a variety of mental health topics. You can also listen to my podcast, Mindful with Minaa, where I go deeper and talk a little more deeper around these topics that Sarah and I discussed today and even more. So you can listen to Mindful with Minaa wherever you listen to your podcast, from Spotify, Apple, whatever platform you choose. And of course, my book is available across all major book retailers. You can also listen to it on Audible and download it on Kindle. So those are some ways that you can connect with me. And lastly, you can also head to my website and visit my download my newsletter. And subscribe is what I mean, so that you can stay afloat of the different things that I share.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Again, your book is really wonderful, and I know so many members of the book club wrote in with questions, and even more so wrote in with thanking me for featuring the book, because it's a gift to us all. So thank you so much. Have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.